So now that we know how to write to a file, we're going to learn how to read from a file, and it's really the same process in reverse. And the idea is that we're not just going to read it in and use the data, but we're going to read in the data and store it so we could use it later on if we really need to. So first of all, what we're going to do is we need to realize that we're going to use this design in order to continue on and know what to expect when we actually read the data in. So looking back at the code, what I've done here first of all is I've added another label called top scores, LBL data, and its purpose is it's going to actually visibly display the data that we read in from the file so we can see how it actually works. So let's go back to the code, but we're going to go into this box here. So instead of writing, we are going to be reading this time. So I'm actually going to steal these catch statements because we can reuse some of these. And we're going to create our try catch block. Try. And below that, we're just going to copy and paste those catch statements. And the idea is that we're going to go through the same process. So I'm going to grab the file path in the exact same way. These 3 lines. So this is using the reflection method, the more accurate method. And we're just going to paste that in. And we're going to continue that, and we're going to steal the next line to make sure that we're getting the proper file name. Alright. Now, as long as this is assuming that your file is going to be actually stored directly in that directory. If you had more root direct or more subdirectories, like maybe you had a folder called like product files or something like that, you might have to add that to the file path in order to make everything work. So I know that my file is called myfile.txt, so I'm going to continue using that assumption. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to do the opposite of a stream writer. I need to build a stream reader. And I'm going to call this one infile. And again, it's going to work exactly like dealing with the console, reading in data from the console. It's always going to come in as text, and if I need to modify that, I need to do any proper conversions as needed. Now, once I've set up the file path, I'm now going to set up I'm going to instantiate my infile. Infile equals file dot. Now for writing text, we use either create text or append text, but this time we're actually reading in text. So we're going to use something called open text, and we're going to specify the file path, same as before. Now that I have my file, I can start reading in the data. So I'm going to read the data in 1 line at a time. Now we set up this file so we have no idea how many lines are actually in the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to set up a few pieces of information. So I'm going to create a string. I'm just going to try and keep my variable declarations together. I'm going to create a string, and I can call this string line. And this line is really going to represent 1 line of text from the file. I'm also going to create a string array, and I'm going to call this one data. And you'll see what this is for in just 1 second. Neither of them are instantiated in any way, shape, or form. Line doesn't have a value, data doesn't have a value, doesn't even know what size it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to keep reading from that file until I've reached the end of the file. How do I actually know when that is? Well, I'm going to use a while loop, and I'm going to say while in file dot end of stream. So I'm going to keep reading as long as end of stream is equal to false. Another cleaner way of actually writing this is just saying while not in file.end of stream. That's going to keep reading until we're all done. Now remember to make sure that you don't have any extra lines at the end of your text file, otherwise this could cause you problems. So for every line of text, I know that it comes in the format name, comma, score. So I need to treat it like that. So I'm going to read in each line 1 at a time. Line equals infile.read line. Now I can manipulate that data. I can pull it apart and do whatever I want with it. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to use a new command called split. So I'm going to say data, which is that array that we created just previously, is going to be equal to line.split. What split does is allows me to split up any form of text that's broken up by some type of separating character. We call the separating character a delimiter. In this case, we know that our name and score is separated by a comma, so our delimiter is going to be a comma. Now it is a character, it's not a string, so I need to use single quotes to surround it. So single quote, single quote, the comma, and then I'm going to end the single quote. So it's essentially going to split up the entire string. It's going to split up the entire string and separate each value by a comma. So in our case, it's going to have two items. So that means data is going to be a single one-dimensional array of two items. Item number 0, or element number 0, is going to be the name. Element number 1 is going to be the actual score. So what I can actually do with this is I can actually start storing this in a permanent data storage setup. So I could actually use, we could think about this. Let's create a counter variable, int count, or let's say int row, which is going to start off at 0. So for every row that we read in, we're actually going to store this data appropriately. So I'm going to say, okay, our top scores array at row, and the first value, which is going to be the name, is going to be equal to data and the first element of data, which is going to be the name value that's stored in there. And then following the same process, our top scores at row, comma 1, which is we're looking to populate the score value now, is going to be equal to data at 1. So now I've actually pulled that data in, and because we're doing this in a while loop and it's going to do it for every single row that's stored in the file, it's going to store the same information back into our 2D array. Now of course, because we have our system set up the way we do, we're essentially overwriting that data, but that's not really the point here. The point here is being able to read the data in and store it. Now that I have that data, I can now manipulate and change or modify and use that data. So I'm going to do a quick little loop that's going to go through all the items inside of that array and display them on in the label data value. So I'm going to do this, and I have my choice. I can do a while loop, I can do a for loop, however I'd like. I'm just going to do a simple for loop. For int I equals 0, equals 0, such that I is less than top scores dot get length bracket 0, because I'm trying to get the number of rows, I plus plus. For each row, I'm going to add on to the current label data value. So I'm going to say label data dot text equals lbl data dot text plus, I'm going to make it go down to the next line first of all, so we have a nice, so we have some formatting, and now I'm going to add on the name and the score. So I can say the name, which is going to be stored in top scores at I, comma 0, because I'm getting the 0 value of top scores, which is the name. And then I'm going to add on to that some type of separating data. Most video games will show something like a dot 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 or something like that. And then I'm going to finish it off with top scores at I again, but this time the one value, the one element, which is going to be the score value itself. Now just put our semicolon in there and we should have everything. The label data should be all set up. So if we run this now, assuming we have no errors, and we type open, we get top scores, Rufus 5,000, Ted 8,000, and Rufus 5,000 again. We have a bug. So let's figure out why. If we are to open the file, we see that we have Bill at 10,000, Ted at 8,000, and Rufus at 5,000. The problem is, inside of the program, what we forgot to do is we forgot to increase row by 1 at each step. Row plus plus. And then essentially that's going to continue on and allow us to, every time we read in, we're putting it at the proper data. So let's try this one more time. Let's try running our program. And we hit open. Now we get bill at 10,000, TED at 8,000, and roof is at 5,000. Exactly what we expect to do. And that is how we read from a file.